Welcome to Ike's Flame. Join us on another Star Wars adventure. Punch it, Chewie. Welcome, it's another Tuesday, and we got another episode of Ike's Flame for you. We're going to jump into another Star Wars adventure today, and we're still this last week in April here, and so we're going to dive in our last Tuesday in April, and we're going to dive into another character, another story, and this week I am super excited. This character that we're going to talk about this week, maybe one of my favorite characters in all of Star Wars. Definitely up there, and just a fun character. There's a lot of different interactions, plays a lot of different roles, and so, and this character specifically spans a wide range of time where we see where we see him play a prominent role in different places. And so, but we're going to focus specifically in this era of the Empire that we've been looking at, kind of in our theme for the month of April here. And so, as we dive into this, I'm excited. I hope you guys are ready to jump in and join me as we get going here. And so, as I teased last week, our character this week is not aligned with the Empire, is not aligned with Rebels. We kind of see him on both sides a little bit, more of the evil side than Rebel side, and so let's jump in. So our character this week is Maul. So known as Darth Maul, that we see in Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, becomes what we know as Maul, just called Maul. And Maul is his species is a Brock, and he is his homeworld is Dathomir, which if you guys are familiar with, he is in the Night Clan, part of the Night Clan, so the Night Brothers and Night Sisters. Night Sisters specifically play a pretty big role within the Clone Wars TV show. We see different that. And if you guys have heard of or familiar with Asajj Ventress and who she is a Night Sister and comes from Dathomir as well. And so that's a little bit of his background. So he was also at one point the apprentice to Darth Sidious, as we in Episode 1, at the time of Darth Maul. So he was technically a Sith for a while. He's a Force user of the dark side. Kind of falls out of being a Sith and kind of he is a Sith, but he's on the outside of being a Sith. I'd say he's a dark side Force user. Within this era, when we look at specifically the era of the rise of the Empire, he's a dark side Sith user, dark side Force user. Not a Sith anymore, and so that's where we find Maul. He has there's just a lot of things going on, and as you guys know, Maul, probably know, in Phantom Menace, Maul gets cut in half. At this point, he has constructed robotic legs, so he has 2 robotic legs. At one point, he had like a 6, I think it was like a 6 appendage, almost like a spider leg thing going on. But at this point, he has robotic legs and is doing his thing. And so we're going to dive into his story. So as usual, we're going to jump into where does Maul appear? And this is going to be a fairly long list of things. I'm not going to get into everything because there's a lot going on. He plays a prominent role in many different places. And so first and foremost, he is in Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, and from there, he has some of his own comics, Darth Maul, and let me see. he plays a role within, as I mentioned, Clone Wars. He's in the Star Wars Clone Wars TV show, and we're gonna dive real deep into season 7 of Clone Wars, which just came out within was that 2 years ago now? I don't remember. Might have been 2 years ago. I'm not remembering off the top of my head. Well, a year or two ago here, the newest season of Star Wars Clone Wars, and so we see him in that. We see, let's see here, what else we got? Some more comics, and he also shows up in the Solo, a Star Wars story, working with Crimson Dawn. If you guys are familiar with that, and working with Kira and Dryden Voss, and so, which is interesting. From my understanding, there was supposed to be a second installation or some sort of a sequel type thing to Solo that never happened, and I don't think is going to happen. And so we kind of have because he showed up in the last 10 minutes of the movie, and so we never really know, or we never really get to see what the relationship is, what is going on, and that sort of thing. And so, but that we do see Maul within that, and he's doing, which we'll get into later, he's doing some sort of kind of like a crime lord. He's a crime lord, taking advantage of the underworld, crime underworld, and making the most of what he can. And so, from there, we go to Star Wars Rebels. It's probably the next thing we see him prominently in. He plays a role in that. We actually see his death in Star Wars Rebels as well, and we get to kind of see how the end of his story plays out, and just kind of some interesting mentions he has within that, and we'll talk about that here in a bit. But so he's in Star Wars Rebels. See if there's anything else substantial to mention to you guys. I think I've covered, and there's a lot of comics and side books and things like that, but nothing super mainstream, and so so that's mainly where we find him at. That's the other thing I was going to mention. We also find him in Queen's Peril, and there's a little bit of that mentioned in that, and so as well, not a whole lot of stories brought out in that. And then I'm trying to think. So I think that's where we find him. That's where the areas where we see him within canon. He may have a few more appearances outside of canon that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head, but yeah. So, anyways, so with Maul has, as I mentioned, Maul he starts in the prequels, he goes, and where I want to focus on today is this Rise of the Empire era where we find Maul. And we're going to start in season 7 of kind of the final arc of season 7 of Clone Wars, which, is, and so we see Maul, we find Maul in here. They think, we find Ahsoka Tano, who was Anakin's Padawan prior, but now has now left the Jedi Order due to her trial she went through, and which we talked about a little bit last week with Tarkin, and so but she teams up with Bo-Katan, a Mandalorian, and Bo-Katan knows where Maul is at due to the fact that Maul is working with Death Watch, which is a Mandalorian sect, and we eventually find out that Maul is basically trying to take over Mandalore and become the ruler of Mandalore, and use that as a basis for him to take control of the underworld and the crime world within the galaxy, and to make a profit and have power that way. And so this is kind of where we find Maul in this moment, leading up to this. Before this, he's been Darth Sidious, Chancellor Palpatine at the time, thought he was dead. He was not, and so Sidious had discovered. Sidious has kind of already earlier in Clone Wars told him to stay out of the way. And Maul has a very interesting perspective on all of this, and part of that is because he has an inside track to what is going on. He knows the plan that Sidious had, that Chancellor Palpatine had, to overthrow the Republic, the Jedi, with Order 66 and the Clone Wars and all of that. So Maul has this inside track, and so he has visions, and I would imagine these are kind of forced visions. And when Ahsoka Tano goes to fight Maul in Season 7 of Clone Wars, he talks about somebody named Skywalker, and which is very interesting. And we see that he says that Skywalker is the key to what Darth Sidious is wanting to do to overthrow the Jedi, and he sees what is happening, what is going to happen, and Ahsoka doesn't believe him because Ahsoka knows Anakin because he's referring to Anakin as her master, as somebody who is a Jedi who is not going to turn to the dark side, she believes. And so they never get the chance. But I always think it's interesting that really Maul was the key to stopping Sidious, potentially, stopping Order 66, but that didn't happen. Didn't get there. The chance was lost. And which is kind of ironic because he talks about he was thrown aside, he was cast out of the plan. But he also admires how brilliant the plan is of the Clone Wars and Order 66. So it's just interesting to see this contrast, this conflict within Maul as he does this. And so as this happens, he kind of becomes the ruler of Mandalore, takes over. Ahsoka ends up defeating him, doesn't kill him, but disarms him, and they capture him. And Bo-Katan gets Mandalore back, and all that. And then from there, we see Maul. He survives Order 66. He's on a capital ship with Ahsoka Tano as they're trying to transfer him back to Coruscant, to the Jedi Temple, and never gets there before Order 66 happens. And part of the 501st is on board with Ahsoka Tano, so they turn against him. And there's this turn against Ahsoka Tano, and there's this chaos and escape of Ahsoka Tano and Maul escaping Order 66 because they both survive Order 66. And so, with that said, we find Maul really in a lot of ways had the key, had the answers to stop Order 66, stop all of that from happening, but he never got the chance. He's not believed, understandably not believed, because he is seen as evil and by the Jedi and not trusted. And I think the other interesting thing with this is he says Skywalker, and says Skywalker is the key to it. He doesn't know who Skywalker is, in which he wouldn't. He might have seen Skywalker when he was a boy in Episode 1, I think. I'm not 100% sure on that. If they actually would have saw each other. When Anakin is first taken off Tatooine by Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, I think he would have been seen, probably, or had a chance at least. And so that honestly made, and I don't think they ever actually come across each other in the Clone Wars, because I think every time they send other Jedi with Kenobi to defeat Maul or attack Maul and to figure out what's going on. So I'm pretty sure Maul and Skywalker have never met, or maybe met once when in Episode 1. And so he doesn't exactly know who Skywalker is. He knows the apprenticeship that is going to become, and that he's going to become the apprentice to Darth Sidious, Emperor Palpatine. And so we find all this out, and Maul, it's just interesting that somebody that is considered evil has the answers, but it never gets to the right people, the right Jedi, the right authorities to actually be figured out. And so all this happens, and so Maul at this point, and I've kind of mentioned, he becomes a crime lord. He becomes somebody who is just making the most of the chaos. He talks about those chaos that come with Order 66, with the Empire rising, with the fall and the ashes of the Republic. And so he takes advantage of it. He's like, I'm going to take advantage of this. I'm going to make the most profit that I can. I'm going to become as powerful as I can, do what I can to do that. And at the same time, he doesn't like the Jedi, but he also doesn't like he doesn't necessarily like the Empire either, or Emperor Palpatine, because he discarded him, and he feels like he could have been the one to do what Skywalker did, but he never got the chance. And so, we find Maul in this tension. He's doing his best to make his way through the underworld, through the crime world of the galaxy, to attain a power, attain profit as much as possible, and that sort of thing. And so Maul kind of has this conflicting side of things, because, and we get to this in Rebels. He tries to lure Ezra Bridger as an apprentice, and that fails ultimately. Ezra kind of connects with him, and because part of also, and this is what we haven't gotten into yet, and I've kind of purposely steered away from until now, is, and I mentioned earlier, you guys, that we know that Obi-Wan initially was the initial one to cut Maul in half. And so Maul puts a lot of blame on Obi-Wan Kenobi, for him not being Palpatine's apprentice, that through this grand scheme of everything. And so we see this, and so Maul has a really hatred for Kenobi, which plays out in the Clone Wars and beyond, and in Rebels. And part of Maul's mission at this point in Rebels is, and all throughout his life after that moment in Phantom Menace, that is to revenge and kill Kenobi. And so they have some interaction in Clone Wars, and then within the Rebels in this era, Maul's trying to use Ezra and Kanan to find Kenobi, and which is also, they find that as a good thing. Ezra sees like, hey, it'd be great if we could find Kenobi, find another Jedi, and that sort of thing. So there's an incentive for them as well. And so, with that said, there's that's part of the reason Maul's trying to persuade Ezra to become his apprentice, and that whole story arc within Rebels there. And so we see all of this happen, and Maul's just trying to make his way through all this. And like I said, in Solo, Star Wars Story, we see him right at the end, probably the last 10 minutes, and we get to see a little bit of a glimpse of how he's still working the underworld. He's working with Crimson Dawn, which is huge, and is a very big underworld crime organization in the galaxy. And at the time, he has become leader over within Clone Wars Season 7. We also see him kind of take over leadership of Black Sun and some other crime syndicates as well. He works with the Pikes as well, and some different things. And so we see that, and we see a glimpse of him working with Dryden Voss and Kira in Solo. And which is something that's never been expanded on, like I said. But so he's still just trying to make chaos and make the most of what he has, and eventually, ultimately, get revenge on Kenobi is his ultimate goal. And and that brings me to I think a very interesting, very interesting, and I think it shows a lot about Maul. Maul wants revenge for anything that has happened to him, whether that's to Kenobi, whether that's to Emperor Palpatine, and anywhere in between. So we find in an episode, Maul confronts Kenobi on Tatooine, where Kenobi is at taking care of Luke. Overwatching Luke as he is being raised, and waiting for the time to be right, as we see in episode 4. And so Kenobi, we have this confrontation. It doesn't last long. Maul wants revenge, and we see Kenobi easily takes the upper hand, and strikes Maul down, and Maul actually ends up dying in Kenobi's arms. And there's a conversation that is had between Kenobi and Maul as all that happens, and it's kind of interesting. And in this moment, Maul has never sensed Luke, doesn't know who Luke is, and understand what is going on. And so, but at the time when he's on Tatooine, right before his death, he realizes Luke is going to play a significant role as a Jedi and things like that. And this goes back a little bit to the Chosen One prophecy that we have that plays out through the prequels and that sort of thing. And so, with that, this is a dialogue, and this is in reference to Luke, and it says, Maul says, "Tell me, is it the Chosen One?" "He is," says Kenobi, and then Maul says, "He will avenge us." And that's Maul's final words in reference to Luke, that Luke will avenge Maul, avenge Kenobi, avenge the Jedi against Palpatine. And so it's very interesting. We see in some ways a camaraderie and an understanding that there was some good in Maul, I think. And that, like, there's almost like if Maul would have understood this prior to Kenobi striking a final blow, even though Maul wasn't dead, I wonder what Maul would have done. What if he decided, hey, like, let me help you, let me do what we can to avenge ourselves, and if he'd play a role within raising Luke or something like that. I don't know. And that may be far-fetched, that may sound weird and crazy, but I think we see there's a little bit of a understanding that Maul has some good in him, that he understands that if the Chosen One does overcome the Empire and the Emperor and Vader, then things will be better, things will change. And so we see this, and I think it's just interaction. I think it also goes through, as we talked about here, Maul has a lot of conflict within him, and between kind of being cast aside by Sidious after he's episode 1, after feeling the revenge that he needs to get to Kenobi, and the fact that Maul is a very talented Force user. He is definitely not a weak Force user. He has a lot of power. He is able to he kills several Jedi through Clone Wars, and so he's not a weak Force user. And so we find this and we see this, and he holds his own against Kenobi for a little bit, and he killed Qui-Gon Jinn in episode 1. He held his own against Kenobi in a few other fights where he wasn't cut in half and no one was actually hurt, really. And also he held his own against Ahsoka Tano, which Ahsoka has turned out to become a very talented Force user. And I wonder if he just feels like his talents were wasted. And so it's just interesting to see this conflict within Maul and why he does what he does. The reason he wants to have power is to make a difference. And he has power, he has grasp and control of things, but never enough control to really make a difference. And because of his past, because he was a Sith, because he is a dark side Force user and all these things, and seen as a bad person, no one believes him. And so I think there's just a lot of conflict in Maul. I love Maul's story arc as he everything plays out, and how I think in his final moments on Tatooine, we see that Maul does have some good in him. And that there was conflict, and he didn't have, for the most part, he didn't have anyone to guide him, and part of that was he didn't let anyone guide him, but there was no guidance for him from anyone else or others, and so I think that's part of it as well. And so, and I think, because we even see him fight against Sidious in Clone Wars, and we see also, and I just remember this in the Rebels, he actually he teams up with Kanan and Ezra to help survive when Vader sends his Inquisitors, and so he fights against Inquisitors alongside Kanan, Ezra, and Ahsoka, and so all that, and so there's all that relationship there, and but he's never able to be guided, and he tries to be the leader, he tries to be the master, and so we see all of that, and I think at the same time, it just, Maul has this conflict that he does not allow to drop, and I think if he would been able to allow the conflict to drop, then he would be able to conflict within him to drop, to kind of go away, then he may be able to bring some good, but that never happens. But he does realize the good, I think, before his time is over. And so I just think I love Maul's story. He has just some really cool aspects about him. He's a very athletic Sith, which is kind of new in a lot of ways. Something we hadn't seen when we first see Maul, and then we also, initially when you see Maul, you see this red and black face with horns coming out of his head. So he's a very unique character, a very unique appearance within Star Wars, and he has these red eyes and horns and all that. And I think the other thing, I remember, I'm a little bit on my age here. I grew up with the prequels, and so that was kind of my childhood. And it's I always remember seeing that on the big screen, live screen. Maul is the first one we ever really see to have a double-bladed lightsaber, and so that's very capturing to the eye, which is kind of fun as well. And so he's just a very unique character. He's one that stands out, and all that. And so it's just fun to see. And another little tidbit I'll just add: when he was ruler of Mandalore, he did possess the dark saber for a while, and so that's kind of a big deal to be one that possesses the dark saber as ruler of Mandalore, being the Mandalore, as they would call it. And so that's just interesting and fun to see. And so he has a great story, and kind of a dark story, a conflicted story, and so it's just fun to see that. And so as we see this, it's just interesting. And so he, like I said, Maul is a character that I just think of, when you think of Star Wars characters, Maul is the one that comes up, and so he's very iconic in a lot of ways. It has become iconic, and I don't know why this comes to mind, but Dr. Squatch, I think Squatch it's the soap brand. I just remember seeing commercials. This is not a this is not an ad for Dr. Squatch. I've never used this. I don't know, but there's 4 different Dr. Squatch they like soap brands that are Star Wars, and Darth Maul. One of them is after Darth Maul, and so I think that just shows the iconicness of Darth Maul, which is kind of cool. That he's seen as one of those very iconic characters in Star Wars, and very noticeable. With his red and black face, that's not a suit; it's just his skin, as is a Brock, in a very different. What do I say? A different species that we haven't seen in Star Wars. So it's just fun. And so as we wrap up, we're going to wrap up as we usually. We're going to do some forecasting, some future. Where might we see Maul next? That's a great question. I'm not real sure. Let's see here. I'm going to say I don't think we're going to see Maul and Kenobi. For a couple of reasons. One, within Rebels, we see, from my understanding, Maul Kenobi would be set prior to Rebels, at least the very beginning of Rebels, like the first season or two of Rebels. Which then, when Maul confronts Kenobi, it's like season 2 or 3. So it'd be too early, from my understanding. I could be wrong on that. And also, Maul is looking for Kenobi. Maul doesn't know where Kenobi's at this point. And Kenobi's been on Tatooine this whole time. As far as we know, we may see something different in the Kenobi show. But, so that's part of it as well. Is like, we don't see Kenobi the timeline doesn't add up. And Maul is searching for Kenobi in Rebels, and so it wouldn't make sense for him not to know where Kenobi's at if he's been on Tatooine this whole time. So I don't see Maul and Kenobi, although it'd be cool. I don't see that happening. I mean, it'd be cool to see Maul live action again, which I don't. And outside of that, I don't know where we would see Maul in any sort of live action. And then I think the only other thing that comes to mind for me, I guess timeline-wise, there is a chance we could see Maul in the Andor show coming up. I kind of doubt that, but timeline-wise, it might work. But I don't think that'll happen either. And then the one I would be, I guess 2 things, I think. One that we have confirmed that I would guess... actually 3, now that I just thought of another one. I'm glad I remembered that. But let me start with the first one. So for number 1, and this one's far-fetched, is if we ever got some sort of a follow-up to Solo, I would definitely, a Star Wars story, whether that's a TV show, animated or live, or even a movie eventually, I don't know. Like I said, we don't have anything from Lucasfilm and Disney to say, hey, yeah, that's for sure going to happen. So we don't know. The second one, which I think is, I don't know, maybe a 40-60% chance, 40% chance he'd be in it, 60% he won't, is maybe in Bad Batch Season 2. Timeline would add up. I don't know what role he would play or how we'd see that happen, but I feel like there's a chance that we could have that. He could play some sort of crime lord role within Bad Batch of Season 2, especially with Bad Batch on the run, and all these sorts of things. So, I don't know, that may be a possibility. It would be kind of fun. Animated again, Robo Legs Maul, which is just fun. And then the third one, which I just thought about, and we don't really know what the basis for this show is, and we don't know when it's coming out. I might have saw 2023 for it, but there's no hard set date, and that is Acolyte, which they have confirmed is going to be a show that is coming, Star Wars Acolyte. And from my understanding, this is going to take place prior to Phantom Menace, and so we have like Star Wars High Republic, so it's going to take place in between those Star Wars High Republic's newer books that have come out and within the last year. And so it's going to take place before Phantom Menace. We don't really know how far before Phantom Menace, but I think Maul could be that. 1 and 2 reasons I say that. Acolyte is I think the basically the definition for acolyte is kind of like a Padawan, an apprentice, and then also with that, acolyte is a name for a night sister that is in canon, and so we have that, and which is interesting because Maul would be a night brother. So I don't know if there's some way he could be called an acolyte, and I don't know. It makes me wonder if acolyte the show could be how Maul became an apprentice to Plagueis, or not Plagueis. I'm getting ahead of myself. To Darth Sidious. I don't know for sure. And part of some of you guys might know more on that, but I just wonder if we'll see some of that potentially, which would be a lot of fun. And I think so. I think that's the best chance we have seeing Maul. And I believe that Acolyte's supposed to be live action, but I think that's one movie I am excited for, or one TV show I'm excited for that is a little bit different, and not in the timeline of most of the other shows that are coming out. And so I think that'll be fun. Excuse me, guys. Sorry. Let me grab a drink here. So I think it'll be fun to see what they do with that, and if that is a possibility. And I definitely think it could be. And a little bit of that, I think, depends. Right now, I'm actually reading Legends Darth Plagueis, which Darth Plagueis is the master to Darth Sidious, and so that's not canon, that book. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with that, and how that overlaps, and that sort of thing. And so we'll see. Darth Plagueis is the book itself, and the character in that book is not canon. It's Legends material, but because Darth Plagueis is mentioned in Revenge of the Sith, that is canon. It's canon that Palpatine's master was Darth Plagueis, so we have that as canon. But we don't necessarily the character itself. So I don't even know if Darth Plagueis would play a role in that, depending on what they do with that Legends material. And so that would just be interesting as well, to see all that. So I'm excited to see what they do if there's anything with Acolyte, which that'll be a little ways away with Maul, but we'll see. And so, so that's kind of my wrap up. Maul's awesome character. I'm excited. If you guys haven't seen some of his appearances, either in Rebels or Clone Wars, I would suggest checking those out, seeing what's going on. And he has a very conflicted, complex character arc as he works through all the revenge he feels like he needs and all those things as well. And so, with that said, thanks for joining me this week for another episode of Ike's Flame, another Star Wars journey. And next week we will be moving on to a new era as we start May, and which will be a lot of fun here. Let me look. I'm gonna pull this up for you guys to give you guys a teaser of what next week is gonna be. And let me pull up my schedule. Sorry about that. Give me a minute. And we will take a look. What's on the schedule for next week? I'm drawing a blank. Alright, let's see here. So next week. We are. So it's gonna be May 3rd next week. So the theme for May is gonna be the original trilogy. Part of the reason I'm doing that is we got May the 4th next Wednesday, so the day after. The next episode will drop, so happy early May the 4th for you guys. And we're going to be looking at characters from the original trilogy all of May, which we got 5 weeks in May, so that'll be fun. And we're going to look at a little more classic characters that you guys are familiar with. And so but we'll go from there, and we'll enjoy that and take a look at those, and dive into some of that, and take a look at characters within the original trilogy that we see as we celebrate Star Wars Month and May the 4th coming up. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode on Maul. Thanks for joining me today, and hope you guys have a great rest of your week as you guys we finish out April here. So this is Ike for Ike's Flame. Thanks for joining for another Star Wars journey. And as we like to say here, light the fire. Have a great week, guys.